of that tool. So first of all, we have Renee McLaughlin from the Global Cyber Alliance. Renee joined the Global Cyber Alliance in 2016. At the GCA, she is the owner of their Cybersecurity Toolkit, which, as you will see, is an invaluable free resource, really focused on helping mostly small and medium businesses, but really anybody implement the key steps of cybersecurity hygiene. Before she joined GCA, she had an extensive background in cybersecurity, notably at the Center for Internet Security, which those of you not in the industry may not know this, but Center for Internet Security is really the leading organization for developing sort of standards and services that help to make the internet more secure, also a nonprofit. Joining Renee are going to be three of my colleagues from DFS. First is William Peterson, who is the Assistant Deputy Superintendent of the Cybersecurity Division here at DFS. He manages the examinations and supervision team at DFS and plays a leading role in developing our examinations program, our training program, both for DFS and some of our partner regulators that we help to train. And before joining DFS, he had extensive experience in IT and cybersecurity in the financial services and healthcare industry. Also joining us is Margaret Martin. She is a director in the cybersecurity division here at DFS, manages a team of cybersecurity examiners, and she's also responsible for coordinating all of the cybersecurity examination assignments and managing the time and the assignments of the entire team here. Then we have Craig Farrar, who is also a director in the cybersecurity division and also oversees a team of the cybersecurity examiners we have here. He's also before coming to DFS, he had experience enterprise risk management and IT in the financial services sector. And Craig also has a lot of responsibility for our training program for training examiners at DFS and also at partner regulators. So with that, I'm going to turn you over to this fantastic team that we've assembled, and they are going to help you. They're going to sort of introduce you to and help you to understand and hopefully help you to apply GCA's Cybersecurity Toolkit. So thanks, and I'll turn it over to Renee to get it started.
Thank you, Justin. I appreciate the introduction, and I want to thank DFS for inviting us today to be part of this. In addition, we've had a fantastic partnership with DFS over the last couple of years, and excuse me, we're going to walk you through the toolkit, which we had. I'll give you a little background while I start to share my screen. Excuse me. We are going to walk you through the GCA Cybersecurity Toolkit for Small Business. This is a free resource, as Justin mentioned, and we're a global organization, so we want to make sure that even though this is all about the New York State, they're at the forefront, and as a proud New Yorker, I came from upstate New York. I'm very happy to be able to support this initiative. But you are still part of a global cybersecurity ecosystem. And that's why it's important that everybody around the world do their part to protect each other, because as we've heard this morning, we're all interconnected. And you could be interacting with folks in the next town or across the world, and you may not even know it. So I wanted to just give you a brief introduction and an overview of what the toolkit provides, and then we're going to dive into some more topical areas that my team members from DFS are going to help talk through some of the substance and why these issues are important. And as you'll see in the second part of our sessions this morning, they'll apply to some real world applications. So to start, we kicked off this toolkit in February of 2019 with the sponsorship of MasterCard, who has a very strong small business support program. And what the idea was to provide primarily free tools that were very simple and easy to understand. And as Justin mentioned, were kind of the basis, the cyber hygiene, as we call it, really aligned with what the Center for Internet Security does on a global scale with their security controls. And we actually map to them along with some federal controls. We map to the United Kingdom's National Cybersecurity Center controls and also the Australia cybersecurity controls. So we truly wanted to make this a global effort and show people that we were aligned with international cybersecurity standards to help small businesses. So when you first jump into the toolkit, the first thing you're going to see is, first of all, it's available in 5 languages in total. We have a program with Mercy Corps in Indonesia. We have French, Spanish, and German as well available. And we have organizations and partners around the world that help distribute the toolkit in those languages. And we have many partners here in the United States that help spread the word. So all of the tools are free. And you might ask, how do we determine which tools to add to the toolkit? We brought together subject matter experts, some from the Center for Internet Security, some of our ambassadors at GCA, our own internal technical experts, including our CEO, who's very well versed. And we identified these 6 topical areas as the most basic cyber hygiene fundamentals that you want small businesses to be paying attention to. And we have a very, and I'll show this in a minute, but we have a very thorough and change control board process where we evaluate all the tools that we are proposing to add to the toolkit. First of all, it has to be free. And by free, it's totally free. It's not a free, 2-week trial and then you have to upgrade. They are totally free for use, and that might limit some of their capabilities, and you can upgrade if you want. But the idea is we wanted it to be free for the small and medium size and even micro. Micro, I think we consider that 1 or 2 person shop, which is very common in Indonesia, for example. But we want to provide you with things that are free and simple to implement. So before I dive into the toolboxes themselves, wanted to just show you some of the features and the types of things that we add to the toolkit, and some of these change from time to time depending on new information or new threats. So we wanted to make sure the toolkit was accessible for a variety of users. So if you have a little bit of background, a little bit of knowledge, and you already know you want to dive into any one of these topics, let's say you want more information on phishing or ransomware, and you want to dive into this toolbox, you can go directly to any of these topics on your own. But let's say you're starting from scratch. You just started a new business, you're an entrepreneur, you want to make sure that you're protected from the get-go. We give you the start button. This is where you start. And this, if you press this, it's going to take you to number 1. And we've numbered them intentionally because we want to take you through step by step. Doesn't mean you can't jump around, but we wanted to give people a guided experience if that's what they prefer, and give them the flexibility to jump around if they wish. The other thing that we have is a learning portal. And this is a separate website. It is actually an entire learning system that is built around these 6 toolbox topics. They're very in-depth. They have little quizzes. They'll give you a score. If you get the wrong answer, they'll tell you why and then refer you back to more resources. But it's just another way of getting the background and the knowledge that you need, and then pointing you back to the tools that you can then implement to apply your knowledge. I'm a firm believer that people learn in different ways. So this is just one of the type of training and learning and awareness resources that we have in the toolkit. We have a variety of others, which I'll show you. I think we also have that entire learning module system in a handbook, and it is downloadable and very thorough. It's broken down into each of the topical areas. And again, it points you back to the tools and the resources, and you can print it out. You can use it in your organization, or you can just view it online. We also have a, for our friends in Europe, Anissa has a similar guidebook for their small and medium enterprises. And it's just another guide and something familiar to the EU population. And we do change this up every once in a while just to give people new information and new resources. We also have a few videos. This is more awareness and why this is important to businesses. If you like to watch a video to learn more about why you should be interested in cybersecurity for your business. And then we also, thanks to MasterCard, they were able to present a video of an actual small business owner who's used the toolkit and the information and her perspective on that. Just one little thing before, a couple little things over here in our left-hand navigation before we dive into the topics and talk about these the important topics for cyber hygiene. We do have some other features that you might be interested in. We do update monthly any recently added. So if you've been to the toolkit and you want to see what's new since you last visited, you can pop right over to this page and it'll show you exactly what's been added since you were last here. We also have a blog and a community forum. That's also a nice resource for anybody who wants to ask a question about a particular tool or who has experience with a tool and wants to provide it, their knowledge and their experience to other community forum users. And then, as I mentioned before, we have the standards. This is our mapping to the international standards, including the CIS security controls. So with that, we'll start talking about some of the topics. So each of our toolboxes has what we call we have an introductory video. Sometimes we have multiple videos depending on the topic. And these are, donated by one of our partners, Wiser Security. They're very, just short, informative, interesting videos. Again, we want people to stay engaged and we don't want this to be a heavy topic. It is daunting, as Justin said, but it can be, I don't want to say fun, but it can be interesting and it can be interactive and give you the knowledge that you need and make you feel more comfortable in implementing some of the tools. So every toolbox has one or more videos topical to the subject. And then we have the ability, we do have additional information if you want to learn a little bit more in depth. Some topics have more information than others. And we're also going to be incorporating some case studies in here with real world examples this year. But what you'll find on every toolbox is we break it into tools and resources. So we start with our tools. And this is really the reason why this is the first toolbox in every toolkit that we have, and we have several. It's because this is foundational. Knowing what you have, and I'll let my colleagues at DFS talk a little bit more about this, but this is fundamental. You can't secure what you don't know you have, and can't stress that enough. That's why we point everybody here first. And there is a CIS has a tool. It's a tracker. It's basically a spreadsheet, but it makes you think through what you have, and you'd be surprised what you have that you didn't remember you had and might be vulnerable. So every tool has a page of its own, gives a description. Some are more in depth than others, and I'll show you some others as we go through the toolboxes, but basically we take you right to that tool by clicking use the tool. And any additional information we provide underneath, again, this is a very basic tool, so it doesn't have a lot, but some of the other ones have everything from FAQs to how-to videos. And we always try to provide a link to our community forum so you can talk to people directly if you want to learn more. So I will pass it off to my colleagues if they wanted to talk a little bit more about this topic and some of the DFS policy templates and documents that we actually have in the toolkit. I'm sure they have more to say about that.
Yeah, thank you, Renee. Hello, everybody. I'm Craig Farrar with DFS. Yeah, as Renee already said, and I guess I don't have to restate this, it's going to sound cliche, but yeah, you cannot protect something if you don't know it's there. So it just reinforces the importance, even for small businesses, in truly understanding the operating environment that your business conducts its business in, and the legal and regulatory environment. But the first step, as Renee pointed out, is understanding the assets in your environment, understanding the different types of data that you will either store, transmit, or process, or that any third parties you do business with might store, transmit, or process. So it is very important, again, to start with that and to have an understanding of your hardware and software assets, your applications and such, but also the data itself. So there is an asset inventory policy, as Renee is showing us here. And there's also the notion that once you've identified your assets, now there's a couple different approaches from manual discovery to there's automated tools. I guess it depends on the size of your business. So there are tools out there to help you identify your devices. There's off-the-shelf stuff. It depends on, again, how big your business is. It should generally be a combination of both automated and manual. And I say, so automated tools are going to scan your network and identify any devices with IP addresses that are attached. Manual might include a physical inventory, walking around the office and saying, oh, hey, and like Renee pointed out, the spreadsheet is a good place to start, the tracker, because it makes you think about, well, geez, printers, and we've got these Internet of Things devices, our Wi-Fi connected thermostats, and even our video conferencing room cameras and things, things that you don't necessarily think about. So it's a good place to start. There's risk there, definitely, and you definitely need to identify those assets and start thinking about the risks to those particular assets. The other important thing is having a process to classify. Once you've identified your assets, classify them based on criticality or sensitivity. So, coming up with criteria, tiers, categories that you'll say, okay, these particular assets, the data, for example, we've got sensitive customer data, we've got credit card numbers, we've got social security numbers, things that are not public that we need to protect. So there is a data classification policy. And generally, the data classification policy will kind of set forth that structure. Again, I've seen things that three simple categories: public, private, and then super private. And don't forget to include any sensitive business data. If you're talking about a merger, acquisition, that's sensitive data, and sometimes the focus is just on customer data. But so there's a policy for that as well, and the policy should really classify the data and then define minimum standards for protecting the data. Use of say encryption or multi-factor authentication, different access control procedures. So there are tools here on the website. I won't talk too much. I know we have limited time. I could go on, but yeah, so there's great tools available. Start to think about how you identify your assets, hardware, software, and the tracking again could be as simple as a spreadsheet to more advanced off-the-shelf products. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. So I wanted to jump next to the password toolbox, because this is a big one, and I think when we go through the scenario in a little bit, you'll understand why. Again, we have actually several videos here, and a lot more information about passwords, but we break it down by category. So in talking about creating a strong password, we do have some tools and we have guidance. We have a lot of resources, and whether it's the training module that I mentioned before, we have some guides from NCSC, our partners over in the UK. We have just a one-page document. A lot of these are good resources too. If you download them and you want to share them or share the link with your employees or your colleagues, there's just a lot here. We have a partnership with Salesforce and some other organizations, and they have a learning module that includes password creation, and we try to stay in line with recommendations with the federal government and other government agencies around the world to make sure that we're giving people options and the best advice possible. I will say I'm going to point out this tool because it is, it's really a great tool. If you don't know that if you've ever been, your password has been, breached, you can put in your email and it will tell you every account that you have. And whether it has been part of a data breach. And you will be amazed at finding out that you had accounts that you didn't even remember you opened, and they've been part of a data breach. And so it's curated by a security expert in Australia, Troy Hunt. It's really a fantastic tool. It's free to use. You can sign up for alerts. So, that's the type of information and tools and resources that we want to provide to people. I don't know, Will or Craig, if you want to talk a little bit more about password policy before we move on to the next subtopic.
Sure. So I could talk about that. So really part of a comprehensive access control and identity management policy or access control policy, one of the key factors of that is really having strong, unique passwords. Unfortunately, there's no set standard for a password policy for commercial organizations. I mean, you have PCI, DSS, Payment Card Industry Standard. That's just policy standards for organizations that store or transmit credit card data. And NIST password guidelines, which are used extensively by commercial organizations as password policy best practices. I mean, here at DFS, we try not to be too prescriptive in our approach to passwords. However, in the recent ransomware guidance that we published out in June of last year, we reminded companies to use strong passwords, strong unique passwords, including recommending 16-character passwords for privileged accounts. One simple approach to improving passwords is password strength is increasing the length of a password. And one way to do that is by using passphrases. So using passphrases is a simple and effective, and while it seems counterintuitive to use a series of random words for a credential, using long passwords makes it easy for users to remember their password and really difficult for password cracking attacks. I mean, by increasing the password length and on top of that, using passphrases, maybe throwing in a couple uppercase and lowercase letters, using zeros instead of, replacing zeros with the letter O, replacing L with the number 1, those types of things can increase your cybersecurity posture and really make it difficult for hackers, to crack your password and then essentially move on. Just a couple red flags I'll raise with passwords. You want to avoid common names or dictionary types of passwords like Winter14 or QWERTY123. Those passwords are used extensively in password spray and brute force attacks, and those are easily cracked. And one last point I'll make too is additionally you want to have unique passwords for each system you access, and you want to avoid reusing passwords. So password reuse is not good cyber hygiene and can lead to systemic compromise of multiple accounts.
And which then leads us to two-factor authentication, otherwise called multi-factor authentication. And this is another really important layer in your defenses. Again, as Justin said, there's no one is ever 100% safe. There's no silver bullet, but all of these tools and resources and the guidance in the toolkit and other other partners resources, it's designed to give you layers of defense, and all these things can, when put together, any one thing can help you improve your cybersecurity, but when you layer them on top of each other, it just improves your security that much more. So, we have the basic tools. We have the Google and the Microsoft Authenticator, very simple, straightforward to set up. We also have, this is, it's listed as a tool, but it's basically, it is a culmination of, all of, the major accounts and how to set up two-factor authentication on each of them. And this list grows. We add to it all the time. But the idea is we want to give people, just get them directly to the information that they need and set up 2FA. This is really one of your strongest defenses after creating a good password. I don't know, Will, if you wanted to add to that.
Sure. So MFA, 2FA authentication, is based on two or more factors. So, something such as a password or a PIN, something you have, for example, such as a hardware, software token, and the tokens that you see out here for DCA are great tools to use. And then something you are, such as a fingerprint or biometric data. Really, the goal of MFA and combining multiple authentication factors results in a high level assurance. It basically, ensures that the person authenticating is who they say they are. Now, for small businesses, MFA is a really highly effective tool to reduce cyber risk. Most of the incidents we see for small businesses are because of gaps of implementation of MFA. And on top of that, user awareness training on social engineering. And as Justin and Renee said earlier, MFA is not a silver bullet. It won't eliminate all cyber risk. However, because MFA protects user accounts and can prevent hackers from obtaining access to network and data, it's a control that's really simple to implement and highly effective. Ideally, all companies should look to implement MFA whenever possible. And while many small businesses licensed under DFS are exempt from the requirement to use MFA for remote access, unfortunately, that does not exempt them from being targeted by cyber criminals. The increase in cybercrime has hit small businesses hard, and DFS has reviewed many incidents at small businesses where cyber criminals have exploited the fact that MFA was not implemented. So, a couple things you want to consider is, MFA is a simple, easy tool. It's compared to the downside, which is being a victim of a cyber attack. There's really a cost savings when you consider the risk of not having MFA. And additionally, I'll add too is whenever possible, you want to, and this is according to our ransomware guidance as well, you want to apply MFA to privileged accounts, whether they're remote or internal. You definitely want to make sure that MFA is applied for privileged access accounts whenever possible. Again, this is all based on your risk assessment, your risk appetite, your risk profile. Certainly, a risk assessment will drive the controls that you implement within your organization.
And from a practical standpoint, and I know it might seem a little daunting when you think about all the accounts that you might have. You can do it in chunks. You can do it like every week. Okay, I'm gonna go through and switch over 5 accounts. I went through this process with our organization. We are, as a nonprofit, we are a small organization of less than 30 employees, but we're worldwide. And we have, as you might imagine, as a virtual organization, many accounts, whether it's social media, WordPress. We have, up to 10 websites. There's a lot, and it can be. I literally just created a spreadsheet and I just started plugging away, and I did a few, each day over a few weeks, and just implemented 2FA or MFA across all of them, and then shared that with our executives, just so that they could see that we had done everything that we could to lock those accounts down. And then if you have accounts, there are some platforms that don't have 2FA available, and you have to, is that a critical account for your business, or is it something you're willing to take that risk? So it's all about risk awareness and risk assessment. Lastly, in passwords, because again, it's a big topic, is password managers. And I noted, there's 2 ways to go. It is a password manager itself, or using browser-based password managers. This particular article by NCSE in the UK, it gives you an analysis of each of them. So it's an interesting read, and it gives you more information about the differences between the two, and then you can make a decision as an organization, which you'd like to use. But definitely, especially if you have a lot of accounts, it's something that you should consider. And Will, if you had anything you wanted to add to that.
Sure. So password managers, really, it's just a software application designed to store and manage online credentials. Some of the benefits, it also generates passwords. So from a password, a complexity or password length perspective, they're great. And usually these passwords that are stored in password managers are encrypted in the database and locked behind a master password. And once all your account and usernames have been entered into that vault, your master password is the only credential you have to commit to memory. So from that standpoint, there's an ease of use benefit. Entering your master password unlocks your password vault. And from that vault, you can retrieve whatever password you need to whatever systems you have access to. Now, DFS doesn't have an official position on password managers per se, but however, it's one of those many tools that companies and small businesses can use and incorporate within their cybersecurity program. Certainly, you want to do your own due diligence. You want to vet the program. You want to make sure it meets your needs and that, from a standpoint of risk, that it's within your risk appetite. Look, a common vulnerability that gets exploited by hackers is weak and reused passwords. And I said this earlier, like password reuse is a serious problem because once a hacker obtains your credentials, they're in the system and they use that password for other systems. So if you, for example, just from a social media standpoint, if you're using the same username and password for your Twitter, your LinkedIn, and your Facebook, they get one, they have access to all. So it's really systemic and not really good cyber hygiene to use the same password for multiple systems. And God forbid if you ever use it for your financial service, same password for Facebook you do for financial services transactions. So a couple key benefits of Password Manager. Again, you don't have to memorize all your passwords anymore, and they can auto-generate highly secure passwords for you. And just lastly, and I said this already, it really improves cyber hygiene. You really are creating a unique password for each site. You're segmenting your data, your access across multiple websites. And so again, you reduce that risk. If someone compromises your Facebook account, it's not going to affect the other account. It's not going to affect your financial data or your internal network because you've been using the same passwords.
Great, thank you. So that's passwords. There's a lot in there, and really encourage everybody to take a walk through and work on implementing some of those measures, or all of those measures actually, and pick what's right for you. But it again, if you do it if you set aside a little bit of time every week just to tackle something and work your way through, it's a lot easier to manage. Another big topic, I think everybody over the last couple of years has become more familiar with the terms of phishing and malware and ransomware. I know here on our local TV, we get stories of local folks who have been victims of phishing or ransomware, and it's becoming more common and in different mediums. It's not just on your laptops and your CPUs anymore. It is, you can be subject to an attack or a phishing attempt in text messaging and or on your phone. So it's prevalent, and we do have again a few videos here that kind of walk through the different topical areas of phishing and ransomware, and we have a little bit more, in-depth information. And then we do have some tools. Now, I will say there are no free antivirus tools for Mac. And we have been searching, and we have been talking to vendors who have the for purchase versions to see if they would be willing to provide free versions for a certain number of small businesses that sign up, or any level of protection. So we're still working on that, but we want to stress how important it is, and that's why we have a little bit of information here to encourage people to get it. But I will say we have some additional training. We have with our new partners at Curricula, they have some really cool training modules to talk about phishing. Again, we try to make it a little bit fun so that it's not so daunting, and it does provide a little bit of information to help you. We have some other phishing policies and videos regarding phishing and malware and ransomware. I don't know, Will, if you wanted to talk a little bit more about antivirus before we move on.
Sure. I'll talk a little bit about phishing, and then we'll circle antivirus real quick. So I mean, definitely phishing, there's technical controls such as email filtering, blocking spam and malicious attachments. That's one layer of defense. I think another critical defense, another layer that gets, overlooked frequently is the employee awareness training. Training employees how to identify, avoid, and report phishing attempts. And certainly companies should conduct a periodic risk assessment to determine the level of training that's needed. But GCA right here, curricula, is a great tool to at least start that process of changing the mindset, changing the culture within your organization, and get them to be more security conscious and really confident and forthcoming when reporting cyber incidents. So just to circle to antivirus and ransomware. So traditionally, antivirus scans, your operating system, file system for remote malware, such as Trojans, worms, ransomware, and then, upon detecting them, remove them from the system. AV typically detects malware by comparing, binaries from known signatures and other processes that are installed on the system. I would say, definitely these tools are great for small businesses. It's one of those measures, but the thing is, antivirus is not all equal, and the type of capabilities of your AV, definitely play a role in your cyber posture. AV has evolved to endpoint protection, and really, again, that level of capabilities can determine the protection you have against threats. In addition to, the traditional antivirus, some of the antivirus capabilities that include it, provide a firewall on your system. So basically filtering out traffic from your endpoint, the ability to blacklist and whitelist applications. Some antiviruses also help with configuring or hardening your device. And also, again, as I said earlier, providing website and email filtering to protect malicious content. Just one point I'll just add, and then we can move on. But in our guidance, we recommended that companies should implement, if they can, if it's feasible, endpoint detection and response solution, really to address the issues with ransomware, because a lot of ransomware, typically the most sophisticated types of ransomware, do avoid virus scanners from time to time. And usually these EDR solutions will typically baseline your system and monitor your system for anomalous activity. And advanced EDR can quarantine infected systems and potentially prevent stopping ransomware from executing before it encrypts the endpoint. So certainly, small businesses, these are great tools. However, if there's definitely other features out there that you would want to consider. And again, this is all based on your risk assessment, right? So outlining the risk to your organizations, what your budget is, and really, going through that exercise to determining what controls are effective for your organization.
And along those lines, ad blockers are another thing that you can use to help. I don't know if you want to talk about that a little, Will, before we go to DNS security.
Sure. So ad blockers are applications, they're plugins or browser extensions that remove or alter, advertising content from a web page. While a web page is loading, the ad blocker looks, at the code and compares it to a list of sites that that are known to put adware or ads, and then essentially blocks them. Blocking ads, tracking, and other third-party scripts are blocked. And for the most part, for the security conscious, but also the privacy conscious user, these ad blocks are great tools. And in some instances, they eliminate the interruptions of the ads, and in some cases will block malicious ads as well.
And then that also ties into DNS security, again, in from a privacy point of view, but also security. So these are Quad 9 is a tool that we recommend. We're actually one of the founders and collaborators in developing it. So a little bit biased, but for good reason. It takes less than, it says 5 minutes to set up. It takes less than 5 minutes, and the app for the Android is even less than that. It's really a very simple, straightforward way to prevent you, if you get that phishing email, Those emails you see all the time in your in the text now, they're coming through via text message. That's smishing. You don't ever want to click on that link. But if you do by accident, or it looks really legitimate and you click on the link, essentially it will block you from accessing that malicious website. So it is, in this particular case, it is combined threat intelligence feeds from more than 22 companies at this point, and global. The organization is incorporated in Switzerland. It doesn't collect any of your personal information. It has no idea what you've been trying to access, and it doesn't capture any of that information. It's purely there to block you from accessing malicious sites and potentially being subject to ransomware or some other cyber crime event. So it's free. It's a nonprofit organization. And really just a very simple, straightforward. So you can set it up on all your devices. Android is the only app they have right now, but they are working on Apple versions, and there's other ways. If anybody's interested, there's other ways to set it up on your Apple devices. But really just a simple, very easy way to protect yourself. And one quick thing on curricula, they actually, to Will's point about employee awareness, this free offering that they have for small businesses, you can actually create your own little, your own little scenario and use it with your employees. So it's the phishing simulator and all these little tools that are available, and I shouldn't say little, they're pretty cool and all free to small businesses. So you should check it out. I know we are, starting to wrap up on our time, and we have a couple things more we want to cover. Just briefly, we want to talk about if you are subject to an attack. Let's say you haven't implemented some of these things that would prevent an attack, or you have, and it still happens anyway. Backing up, and I'll let Margaret, go into more detail on this, but backing up on a regular basis and using these tools is really going to save you a lot of heartache and a lot of lost downtime for your organization. So I'll turn it over to Margaret to touch on this.
Hi, good morning, all. Today, I'll briefly discuss segregated backups, but before we go into it, I'd like to go through some definitions. One of our major industry organizations, the FFIEC, has defined disaster recovery as the process, the policies, and procedures related to preparing for recovery or continuation of technology infrastructure, systems, and applications, which are vital to an organization after a disaster or outage. The ability to recover and continue operations is greatly dependent on the steps management has taken to plan ahead for possible business disruptions. Disaster recovery focuses on the recovery of information, technology, systems, and applications needed to support business functions, whereas business continuity involves recovery of operational processes, procedures, people, places, for keeping all aspects of a business functioning in the midst of disruptive events. Why have DRBCP? In today's environment, it's not if, but when something happens, institutions that have a well-practiced plan will be ready to react, respond, and recover faster with fewer losses. Our institutions must show resiliency and stability because they are often a cornerstone of their community. Backups protect against human errors, virus attacks, ransomware, hardware failure, power failure, and natural disasters. You've heard a mention of DFS's ransomware guidance, which was published on June 30th of 2021. Control number 8, which is tested and segregated backups, states the following. Companies should maintain comprehensive segregated backups that will allow recovery in the event of a ransomware attack. This is to prevent hackers from deleting or encrypting backups. At least one set of backups should be segregated from the network and offline. It is important to periodically test backups by actually restoring critical systems from backups. This is the only way to be sure the backups will actually work when needed. Ideally, you want to do the following. Place your backup storage devices in a separate network segment with access only to the servers that are being backed up. Use separate username and password for backup operations to prevent credential reuse. And Will alluded to that earlier. Keep your backups offline. I know tapes and tape rotations are a pain, but they are totally inaccessible to a remote attacker when not in the tape drive. I'm not saying you have to go back to tapes if you've weaned yourself from them, but they should be considered if the other controls mentioned above are not feasible in your environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. And I just wanted to note, we do have some other, in addition to the tools and all the information that Margaret's provided, we have some resources. Again, we have a background or a guide, and also the No More Ransom project, which is fantastic. We're a part of the partnership here. It basically, if you are the victim of ransomware, they actually have the tools to help you recover from that, from most of the ransomware out there, and it's available in, as it says, in 37 languages. So it's a global initiative, headed up by Europol, and really just a fantastic resource if you happen to fall victim. And then before I hand this over to Will and Craig to wrap up, I just want to make a note. We're not going to talk too much about this because this is like a whole other session in and of itself, and we've done 5 weeks of training on this, but it is all about DMARC. And if some of you may be familiar with it, but it's really about protecting your email to make sure that people can't spoof your email. So if you're interested in this, we have a ton of resources. I'm happy to talk to you about it further. And if you want to reach out, but it's just another important aspect to protecting your organization and your company's reputation. So I think that we do have probably about a little less than 10 minutes. And I know that I'll stop sharing, but I think Craig and Will might have had some additional thoughts and topics that they wanted to cover, just to highlight and talk about good practices in cyber hygiene and some of those areas. Will?
Thank you, Renee. So we kind of touched this on already, and I just want to underscore because I think it's very important, with respect to email security, because again, phishing, social engineering, those are the types of threats that we see at DFS that are very common and happen in multiple layers, either through, business email compromise or even through delivery of ransomware. Usually it's something that's gotten through those technical controls, those email filters, and it's been presented to the employee, and an employee clicks on the link or opens the attachment. Again, I can't underscore the importance of having, employee awareness training, training your team, or or even training yourself on good cyber practices, practicing a good cyber culture, and really engaging and making sure that, when there's a problem or something doesn't seem right when it comes to email, that you don't act on, you don't respond to the person sending the email, but you actually ask questions, you interrogate, and you follow up with either your supervisors or your IT consultants on addressing those risks. Again, I think awareness training is huge. Global Cyber Alliance is a tool for training. I think for the most part, it's just one of those many tools to help get that muscle memory, to help get that culture going within your organization.
Thank you. Craig, anything you wanted to add before we close up?
Yeah, no, we'll talk about email security. And one last thing that we were hoping to talk about earlier, just quickly, is website security and the importance of scanning. So, that's one way that attackers can get in, is they'll target you, especially if you're a small business and you have a website that's managed by a small company, it's important there are tools available out there. I know GCA, I think, has some, but there are some that are still being evaluated. So just be mindful of the fact that there are some free tools, there are some free scanning options, and I think website security is very important to prevent attackers from getting in and getting access to your data. So I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg, and thank you, Will and Margaret, for supporting the overview. I think just to wrap up, I will say, I will put in the chat our toolkit email if anybody has any questions that they want to follow up with. I think we probably will allow some questions later in the presentation with the second set. But if you have any specific questions or you want more information about something you saw in the toolkit, please, feel free to